Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome, everyone, to another explainer where we take complex, truly fascinating concepts and break them down so you can easily grasp the big picture. Today, we're exploring a deeply intricate metaphysical magic system. And honestly, it serves as this profound lens for understanding human nature, cosmic balance, and really the ultimate choices we all face between virtue and vice. We're going to unpack the teachings of Concordia to Era's archers, looking right at the very fabric of how body, soul, and the elements all interact.
So, here is our roadmap for today. We're going to define the Geo and Dio natures, explore the fall from grace, and outline the three facets of the resulting curse. After that, we'll contrast material power with spiritual wisdom, map the body to its environment, and finally, we'll look at choosing your ultimate fate. Let's jump right in.
Starting off with Section 1, the Geo and Dio natures, and the elements of body and soul. To truly understand this universe, we really have to start at the absolute baseline of its cosmic dualism.
In this lore, Concordia teaches us about the advanced elemental wheel. Basically, this is a system where absolutely every object and every event exists as a result of a delicate balance and interaction between the material and the spiritual. You see, every single element expresses two distinct natures. First, you have the material nature, or the geo nature, which represents the physical, tangible properties. Second, you have the spiritual nature, or the dio nature, which carries the actual virtue, energy, or vitality of that element. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the brilliant scientific analogy Concordia uses to explain this. Just think about an atom. The geo nature is symbolized by the human body, much like how a proton carries the physical mass of an atom and holds a traditionally positive value. But it's inherently ephemeral, it doesn't last forever. On the flip side, the decio nature is symbolized by the soul and spirit. Those act more like the neutrons and electrons. The decio carries the energy and holds a neutral value, simply because it represents the capacity for both virtue and vice. So while the physical body is temporary, this spiritual decio nature, it's completely eternal. If we look directly at Concordia's lectures, there's this fascinating point about the soul itself. While the spirit might represent virtue and vice in isolation, the soul actually represents perfect harmony. It is the peaceful coexistence of virtue and vice. Concordia puts it perfectly. It's the proverbial lion lying down with the lamb and the wolf with the kid. It's just a beautifully poetic way to describe absolute elemental equilibrium. But, that begs the question, how did humanity lose this perfect equilibrium? Let's move to Section 2, the fall from grace, and the innate void, to see how this essentially builds the inciting incident of the entire human condition. This brings us to the concept of the fall from grace. According to the ancient cultures in this text, every single living being is born with this deep-rooted sense of loss. It's a fundamental feeling of being, incomplete. In fact, these cultures believed this was the literal reason healthy babies cry when they're born. They are actually mourning this innate loss. This mythological event creates a very real psychological void, and it masterfully tethers this high fantasy magic system straight to highly relatable universal human struggles. So, the absolutely crucial point is this. If we're all born with this void, how on earth do living beings attempt to fill it? This single question sets up the entire divergence of paths in this universe. It splits humanity right down the middle, into those who chase the material and those who seek the spiritual. Before we look at those two paths, we've got to understand the environment humanity is actually working within. That brings us to Section 3, three facets of the curse and our material subjection. Let's walk chronologically through the mythological timeline that's presented to the archers. First up, at creation, God created man from the dust of the earth, but crucially, granted man dominion over that dust. Man had the full ability to master himself and completely surpass his geo nature. But then came step 2, the fall. Triggered by disobedience, this led directly to the birth of sin and death. Finally, this resulted in step 3, the cursed state. Because man was made of dust, when man was cursed, the entire material world fell under subjection too. Humanity tragically and completely lost its dominion over the physical realm. Concordia actually breaks down this cursed state into 3 specific facets. First is toil. This is the sheer, exhausting exertion of effort required just to live, which is symbolized by tilling the earth and fighting off weeds and thorns. Second is dependency. Humanity became completely subjected to the fragile material earth just for food and basic survival. And third is duality, or enmity. That's the continuous, never-ending struggle against the forces of evil. Basically, humans became utterly trapped by their own fragile geostate. And this perfectly illustrates the famous phrase, dust to dust, ashes to ashes. Man's entire life now revolves entirely around the very dirt he was made from. Concordia points out a really profound irony here. Even when mortals crave power through acquiring material wealth, at the end of the day, they are still just chasing dirt. Think about it. Whether you trade with gold, precious minerals, or even paper money made from trees, it all sprouts from the earth. The very things we obsess over to gain power literally just highlight our absolute subjection to the dirt.
Which is a perfect transition into the core attention of our explainer. Section 4, Material Power v. Spiritual Wisdom, or as it's known, the heights versus the depths. How do mortals correctly versus incorrectly try to solve that inherent sense of loss?
To deal with that agonizing sense of loss, living beings will ultimately choose one of two paths. They either pursue the heights or they pursue the depths. Pursuing the heights means chasing the physical, amassing material wealth and enhancing physical strength. You're aligning with the geo-nature, and it's heavily associated with earthly power. But remember what we said earlier, the geo-nature is ephemeral. Power alone can never truly satisfy mankind's internal void. It honestly just makes you crave more. On the other hand, pursuing the depths means aligning with the deo-nature. It's the pursuit of the invisible and the abstract, prizing virtue and emotion way above wealth. This is the path associated with true spiritual wisdom. Looking at these lecture texts, Concordia explains this through the ultimate test, the tree of knowledge. Now, it is a tree of good, but it's also a tree of evil. Humanity can seek the Deo nature through virtue and obedience to good, or they can attempt to usurp it by pursuing vice, listening to the serpent's voice of evil. And as the lore goes, choosing the serpent resulted in the birth of sin and death, which are the ultimate embodiments of decay. Now, let's shift our perspective down from these grand cosmic myths straight to the intimate physical biology of the human body. In Section 5, Body and Environmental Reflection, the macro to micro mapping. And this brilliantly illustrates the core physical mechanic at play. Look at this exact quote. The human body is a reflection of all the forces exerted upon it by its environment. What this means is that external elements must perfectly match your internal elements, otherwise a living organism falls into a diseased or even deathly state. Our bodies aren't isolated. They are essentially walking, breathing maps of the world around us. Let's actually break down how those specific elements interact with us. Fire exerts heat on the body, while water acts in antithesis to regulate that heat. And fascinatingly, both the Earth's surface and the human body share a roughly 60 to 70% water ratio. Crazy, right? Wind grants the power of respiration. But the most surprising interaction by far is between Earth and lightning. The lightning radiating from our nervous system interacts with the electromagnetic energy from the Earth's poles to create the phenomenon of magnetism. Concordia reveals a really profound Debo implication here. This magnetism doesn't just help us navigate physically. It actually implies that people who are selfless and orient their lives around relationships literally have a firmer, more magnetic sense of purpose in life. All right, we've seen the mechanics of the body and the soul. Now let's transition to the final synthesis of this explainer in Section 6, choosing your ultimate fate, the path of virtue versus vice. So we know the Deo nature is dominant to the Geo nature, right? I mean, a body without a spirit is really just an empty shell. But what happens when that living being purposefully aligns its Deo nature with vice instead of virtue? This is it. This is the ultimate life or death stake of this entire magic system. The consequences here are absolute. If a being aligns with a vice of the Deo nature, it completely cancels out any positive value. The decay attribute of vice exerts its force, gradually sapping the life force of the body until it is completely extinguished. Concordia calls this terrifying concept the double death. You die once because the physical body is temporary anyway, and then you die a second death caused by spiritual decay. However, if a living being aligns with virtue, they cancel out the negative value. The virtues of purity and zeal actually overwrite decay. This allows the body and soul to exhibit a completely positive value, expressing continuous growth and eternal harmony. And here is the ultimate synthesis of it all. Humans do not have to remain trapped by the fall from grace. By actively pursuing spiritual wisdom over material power, by choosing the depths over the heights, a mortal can actually allow their spiritual Deo nature to exert its influence over their physical Geo nature. It literally transforms it. You can completely overwrite the curse of decay. And in doing so, you can achieve transcendent immortality. I want to leave you with this incredibly memorable quote from Concordia that just sums it all up perfectly. Basically, choose the Geo nature alone and you risk losing everything. Choose the virtue in the Dio nature, and you stand to gain everything. Neither nature is inherently evil. It all simply comes down to how you choose to fill your innate sense of loss. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer today. As we wrap up, I really want to challenge you to reflect on this. In your own life, are you endlessly exhausting yourself chasing the ephemeral heights of material power, or are you cultivating the eternal depths of spiritual wisdom? Think on that.